Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. Iran reiterates its promise to retaliate against the US for striking 3 of its nuclear facilities over the weekend. Calls President Trump a gambler, says the US may have started the war, but Iran will end it. US President Trump warns of a regime change in Iran, even as the Secretary of State insists that the US is at war with Iran's nuclear program and not with the nation itself. Oil prices rise after Iran's parliament unanimously approves closing of the Strait of Hormuz and disrupting around 20% of the world's oil supply. The final decision on closing the strait lies with the country's National Security Council. The US urges China to intervene. Escalating tensions between Iran and Israel and closed airspaces in the region disrupt civilian flight operations. Airlines reroute flights via the Caspian Sea or via Egypt and Saudi Arabia despite the resulting higher costs. Air France, KLM, Singapore Airlines and British Airways cancelled flights to and from Dubai, Riyadh and Doha over the weekend. Warn more cancellations are possible. Indian benchmark indices are dragged lower by global concerns over the escalating tensions in the Middle East, but there's no strong sell-off yet. The Sensex and the Nifty down over 0.5% each, but the mid-cap index closes in the green. Global markets also deal with mild aftershocks. US stocks tread water, but German and French stocks see mild losses. Asian markets, a mixed reaction. Food credit doubles in the first 2 months of FY26 on the back of robust wheat procurement. Early Kharif sowing signals that the momentum is likely to continue, but non-food credit hits a 3-year low. The government is unlikely to extend the waiver on transmission charges for interstate renewable energy projects beyond the 30th of June. Sources say industry may face higher tariffs in a phased manner as developers factor in added transmission costs. At least 7 people are reportedly killed and over 22 injured in Kyiv after Russia launched over 352 drones and 16 missiles at various parts of Ukrainian territory. This latest barrage is one of the biggest since the conflict began in Feb 2022. Well, let's go straight to the top story this evening. The United States striking nuclear sites on Iranian territory has exacerbated tensions in the Middle East, even as Israel claims that it wants to wrap up the war soon. Now, the conflict between Israel and Iran intensified, with Tel Aviv continuing to strike the regime's military facility. Israel struck Iran's underground uranium enrichment facility at Fordo, which was struck by the U.S. over the weekend. New bombardments were also reported in Tehran and other cities, with 6 airports being hit in the attacks. Iran launched 7 missiles targeting Israel over a 40-minute period. Calling President Trump a gambler, the Iranian military has said that the U.S. may have started the war, but Iran will end it. Iran's parliament has approved the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The decision to close the waterway now rests with the country's National Security Council. Iran's foreign minister also met Russian President Putin in Moscow. Meanwhile, people in multiple American cities and across the world took to the streets to demonstrate against President Trump's decision to launch strikes on Iran. Protests also broke out in Iran's capital of Tehran as well, with citizens demanding a response to the U.S. actions. President Trump has hinted of a regime change in Iran. The president's comments come after Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio insisted that the U.S. did not want a regime change and was only at war with Iran's nuclear program and not with Iran itself. Take a look.
No, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program, and I think the president took decisive action to destroy that program last night. We have to give an incredible amount of gratitude to the troops who did an amazing thing last night. Think about this, John. They flew thousands of miles away, a 30-hour nonstop flight. They never touched down on the ground, and they dropped a 30,000-pound bomb on a target about the size of a washing machine. No military in the world has the training, the skills, and the equipment to do what these guys did last night. I know the president and I are both very proud of them.
Well, that's J.D. Vance, and tensions with West Asia has only worsened with the U.S. striking Iranian territory since the 1979 revolution. Now, while China has criticized the U.S. for violating Iran's sovereignty, Arab nations, though empathetic towards Tehran, are yet to condemn Washington. Parikshit is standing by now to take us through the global reactions coming in. Parikshit, whether it's Macron in France or it is Putin, take us through what the world is saying.
Well, indeed, a very worrying situation, Serene, and the world has been calling for de-escalation, but they've been largely divided on the U.S. attacks on Iran. in support of Israel. The 57-member Organization of Islamic Cooperation has called on Israel to stop these attacks against Iran. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation will be setting up ministerial contact group for de-escalation. Saudi Arabia, Qatar and other Gulf nations have expressed dismay over the American attack. However, the Gulf nations have stopped short of condemning the US. China has criticized both US and Israel, calling for de-escalation of the conflict with Iran. The Chinese ambassador told the UN Security Council earlier that the US has violated Iranian sovereignty and exacerbated tensions in the Middle East. China has called for stability for shipping routes in the Middle East. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is in Moscow for serious consultations with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In fact, Dmitry Medvedev, ex-Russian president, launched an attack on President Trump and questioned the effectiveness of the US operation. He claimed that critical nuclear infrastructure in Iran was unaffected. He also went on to say that the number of nations ready to supply Iran with nuclear warheads is only going to increase. Putin has said that Russia will take into account that 2 million people from Soviet Union, the erstwhile Soviet Union, and Russia live in Israel, and clearly Russia's response has been muted, and experts say they are unlikely to extend any real help to Iran. Prime Minister Modi has spoken to the Iranian president, calling for de-escalation. European Union leaders have called for de-escalation negotiation as well, but they are backing the US line that Iran must never acquire a nuclear bomb.
Many thanks, Parikshit, for joining us. That is the latest there as far as global reactions are concerned. And as Parikshit was pointing out, crude prices have hit a 6-month high on fears that Iran might close the Strait of Hormuz and disrupt the supply of oil globally. Now, this after Iran's parliament approved the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, which accounts for nearly 20% of global oil and LNG shipments. Several brokerage firms now believe that the crude oil prices could touch $130 per barrel. Meanwhile, Union Oil Minister Hardeep Singh Puri has said that the government had anticipated the possibility of such disruptions and had diversified its supply, adding that India has enough stock to last up to 3 weeks. Take a look.
We had diversified the sources of supply, and out of the 5.5 million barrels of crude oil that India consumes daily, about 1.5 and 2 million only come through the Straits of Hormuz. We import roughly 4 million barrels through other routes, and our companies, the oil marketing companies, have enough stocks. Most of them have stocks up to 3 weeks. One of them has, in fact, 25 days stocks. And we are also confident that we can increase the supply of crude through other routes should the situation so warrant.
That's the oil minister there. Now, the conflict in West Asia impacting Indian exports to Iran. Nearly 1 lakh metric tons of basmati rice exports are said to be stuck at the Kandla and Mundra ports. Speaking to CNBC-TV18, the All India Rice Exporters Association President Satish Goyal said that the export can't be sent to Iran as no insurance company provides cover to vessels entering a conflict zone. Exporters also worried of further impacts if Iran decides to close the Strait of Hormuz. And staying with the conflict, Iran has threatened to pull out from the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons treaty after the US strikes on its nuclear sites. But what is the significance of the treaty and what is India's stance? Santya is here to decode what it means. Santya.
Shireen, the ongoing US-Israel-Iran conflict has brought the NPT back into focus. The NPT is aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and promoting cooperation in the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Signed in 1968 and coming into force in 1970, the NPT has 191 state parties divided into nuclear weapon states and non-nuclear weapon states. The state parties that manufactured or exploded a nuclear weapon before 1st of January 1967 are classified as nuclear weapon states. The rest of the parties are non-nuclear weapon states. Under the NPT, the non-nuclear weapon states commit not to manufacture or acquire nuclear weapons, and the nuclear weapon states commit not to encourage or assist non-nuclear weapon states in acquiring nuclear weapons. Nuclear powers like India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea are not NPT parties. India calls the treaty discriminatory, unequal and flawed, and North Korea withdrew from the treaty in 2003. So if Iran withdraws from the treaty, it will no longer be legally bound to allow the International Atomic Energy Agency to inspect its nuclear sites, nor will it be legally bound to refrain from building nuclear weapons. Iran says it signed the NPT and adhered to the IAEA safeguard agreement, unlike Israel, which not only didn't sign the NPT and never allowed IAEA inspections, but also does not even acknowledge its nuclear program. Iran has accused the Western world of conspiring against it by falsely accusing it of violating the NPT in order to destabilize the Middle East and further its oil agenda in the region. The Western world, however, claims that despite signing the NPT, Iran is flouting its norms. In 2005, Shireen, the IAEA passed a resolution accusing Iran of non-compliance with its comprehensive safeguards agreement under the treaty. Back then, despite its long-standing business, traditional and historic relationship with Iran, India voted against Iran. In 2006, again, when the resolution was referred to the UNSC, India again voted against Iran. Experts say that at the time, India was keen on portraying itself as a responsible nuclear power, and that's why it voted against Iran. However, since 2024, when resolutions were passed against Iran at the IAEA, on 3 occasions, Shireen, India abstained from voting each time. The ongoing conflict will have long-lasting effects on India and Indo-Iran relations. India has considered Iran a strategic and trading partner. The Chahabar port is India's response to China's Gwadar port in Pakistan. Hence, the conflict and its outcome are extremely crucial for India as well. Shireen.
Sandhya, many thanks for joining us. Let's take our viewers through the market action of the day. Indian equities gave up early gains, ending in the red amidst global concerns over the Middle East tensions. The Sensex slipping over 0.5%, closing about 500 points lower. The Nifty lost about 140 points, down about 0.5% or so. But the mid-cap index closed about 200 points higher. So the broader markets did outperform for the second day. Prashant joins us now to take us through the market action. Prashant, finally closing in the red, but not too bad.
Well, the market reaction was very, very muted to the early Sunday morning US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites. Brent oil prices jumped 6% at open, but very quickly settled down to being about 2% higher. By the middle of the day today, they'd actually slipped into the negative on a day-on-day basis compared to the last close. And that tells you quite a story. And similar was the case with US equity futures or markets which were trading in Asia, etc. Nifty Bank down slightly, nothing major, less than 0.5% basically. But mid and small caps actually recovered, and they both ended in the green. The other story, and part of the reason, of course, why the market was down was geopolitics, but there was also a specific reason, which is IT stocks on the back of the Accenture results, which had been released on Friday. So actually, if you look at the top losers, it was Infi, HCL Tech, Wipro, TCS. These were down between 1 and 2.5%. There were also a few other losers, L&T, Hero MotoCorp and Mahindra, which lost in trade. On the upside, Trent was the biggest gainer on the Nifty. BEL was up about 3%, and there was a Hindalco and Bajaj Finance, which were up over 1% each. So just 4 names with gains in excess of 1% is what you had. More down than up numerically, advanced decline skewed towards what was down, but volumes all on the upside. And actually, that's the reason why I'm going to look at what was up first. Z Entertainment, 12%, biggest volume-led gainer. The standalone refiners, Chennai Petro and MRPL did very, very well. Wire and cable companies, Polycab and KEI standing out. The defense companies, Garden Reach, Paras Defense, Zentech, Idea Forge, Eventel, and many others actually, looking up. And there was a spattering of other companies from a variety of sectors which did quite well. As I said, there was more stuff which was down, but no volumes. But I'll just name out a few. Ola Electric, biggest volume-led loser, 6%, new low here, $43 by close. Siemens was down 4%. Astral was down about 4%. There was LT Foods, OneSource, Sterlite Tech, Lal Pathlabs, some of the names which actually ending the session lower. The big, of course, talking point which markets are watching, of course, is Iran's response. If it's targeted, the markets will see it as an eventual road to sort of de-escalation. If it's more widespread, I guess, lingering continued uncertainty. Back to you.
Yes, that it certainly does, Prashant. Many thanks. In the currency market, the rupee weakened against the dollar as tensions in the Middle East flared up. This after the dollar index strengthened following following US's strike on Iran's nuclear sites over the weekend. The rupee closing 16 paise weaker. Shares of Ola Electric slumping in trade today. This after 2.41 crore shares of 0.55% equity changed hands in block deals. The deal was worth 107 crore rupees. The buyers and sellers of the transaction are not yet known. Earlier this month, Hyundai Motor and Kia Corporation exited Ola Electric Mobility through block deals, so the stock under pressure today. Aditya Birla Lifestyle Brands is listed on the stock exchanges after its demerger from Aditya Birla Fashion and Retail. The demerged business listed on the NSE at 167 rupees a share, slightly lower than its discovered price of 171 rupees a share. Aditya Birla Lifestyle Brands comprise Reebok, Louis Philippe, Van Heusen, Alan Solly and Peter England, among others. We'll end to a break, but up next, food credit doubles in the first 2 months of FY26 on the back of robust wheat procurement. Early Kharif sowing signals that the momentum is likely to continue. That and more when we return. Food credit disbursed by banks has doubled in the first 2 months of the current fiscal year, hitting 34,000 crore rupees, driven by strong wheat procurement by the Food Corporation of India and other state agencies. Sapna standing by with more. Sapna, what else are you picking up?
Well, the data speaks for itself. So if you look at the financial year on year, well, that's a jump of almost 100%. It's double, 34,000 crores versus 17,000 crores April, May last year. And also calendar on calendar, the jump is even bigger. It's almost close to tenfold growth. So around 33,000 crores versus a mere 3,500 crores worth of offtake in terms of food credit by banks last year. So that's one piece of it. Well, of course, the reasons are wheat procurement. So if you look at the wheat procurement data itself, 30.88 million is somewhere the government has done in terms of the procurement, 16% higher year on year. And interestingly enough, this is also the highest among the last 3 Rabi marketing seasons. So if you look at, say, for example, 2023, the data, it was around 18 to 19 odd million tons of wheat had been procured. And that graph kept going up, and now we are almost close to 31 million odd. So what it has done is that it has really helped in terms of the food stock, overall food stock, and also in terms of the buffer requirement. And plus, very important, what kind of allocation goes to the PDS system. That is basically the free food grains program that the government has been running. So, of course, if you look at the central pool, as of now, around 38 million tons of wheat is there. This is double of what is required in terms of the PDS offtake. That's somewhere around 17 odd million tons is required in terms of the free food grain program. And plus, that 38 million odd tons is actually 4 to 5 million tons higher than your buffer requirement. So this is all very good news. Now, there's also another development that's happening parallelly because of the early monsoon. The Kharif sowing has actually already started, and what we are given to understand from data, of course, and this is the latest number from the Food Ministry, is that the acreage, or rather the area sown, especially for rice, has actually gone up. It's already higher by around 11 odd %. These are May end numbers, early June. So, the rest of the season still remains. So, net, this is a good indicator for the rural economy. This is what we are given to understand. And possibly, if this is the way that things will continue, probably another bumper harvest, as far as Kharif at least is concerned, there is no reason to think that the growth in food credit is going to flag off. Or rather, it's expected to continue. That's what the broad expectation is.
Okay, Sapna, many thanks for joining us. The government is unlikely to extend the waiver on transmission charges for interstate renewable energy projects beyond the 30th of June. Sources say industry may face higher tariffs in a phased manner as developers factor in added transmission costs. Shivani Bajaj is here with more. Shivani, take us through the impact and the implications.
Well, that's right. The ISTS waiver, or the Interstate Transmission System waiver, which has been a crucial policy tool since 2019, is unlikely to be extended beyond the June 30th deadline. That's what the government sources are telling us. Now, Discoms and the industry has been pushing for an extension in this case. These charges are a major cost component for developers, and the waiver helped make solar and wind project bids more competitive in the recent years in India. While the exemption was originally set to end in 2023, it was extended till June 2025 to support India's 500 gigawatt renewable energy target. Now, from July onwards, new clean energy projects may face increased cost as developers will need to pay ISTS charges, potentially pushing up green power tariffs in India. Now, this could affect ongoing project bids, financing assumptions, and even the pace of future renewable installations. Delayed projects also that counted on the waiver are at risk, potentially becoming financially unviable. According to industry sources, the ISTS waiver has saved developers approximately anywhere between 0.5 rupees to 1.6 rupees per unit, which is a big chunk of their competitiveness. So now, from 1st July, if this extension is not granted, which government sources say will not be, transmission charges are slated to return in stages. 25% of applicable ISTS charges for projects commissioned between July 2025 and June 2026, gradually rising to 100% by July of 2028. Back to you.
Shivani, many thanks for joining us. In international news, Israel has said it has recovered the bodies of 3 captives held in the Gaza Strip since Hamas's 2023 attack. This comes as the Israeli military's attack on the besieged enclave killed more than 30 Palestinians. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu said that pressure Israel has put on Iran is helping its mission in Gaza. At least 7 people have been killed and dozens have been wounded in a massive Russian drone and missile strike on Ukraine's Kyiv and nearby regions. The attack sparked fires in residential areas and damaged the entrance to a metro station bomb shelter. 4 children were among those injured. Ukrainian President Zelensky said preliminary reports indicate that ballistic weapons from North Korea were also used. Now, Tesla's much-hyped robo-taxi service has been launched in Texas. The first rides, which are priced at $4, are being offered in parts of Austin. A small group of influencers were invited to participate in the closely monitored pilot. The robo-taxis use driverless Tesla Model Y vehicles. However, the electric vehicle maker has not provided details on the scope of the Tesla robo-taxi launch. NATO's member nations have agreed to raise their defense spending target to 5% of GDP. This is in line with US President Donald Trump's demand. However, Spain has said it received NATO approval to opt out of the spending target. Spanish PM Pedro Sanchez has said the nation can meet all NATO commitments by spending only 2.1% of its GDP. Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Do stay tuned. We're back in a minute with plenty more.